Hey, I'm Di McQueen, licensed clinical social worker, family and addiction expert. I'm here with Dr. Brian Jackson, my longtime cohort who specializes in the field of addiction. Welcome to Healing Families Shattered by Addiction.
Di and I have worked with addicts, alcoholics, and their families for over 30 years combined. Our podcast and coaching programs focus on families who have a loved one suffering from addiction. Our experience has been that this disease affects families as much, if not more, than the addict or alcoholic.
Is your world spinning out of control? Are you codependent? Are you experiencing worry, loss of sleep, and difficulty concentrating? If so, you're in the right place. Brian and I have both personally lived it, learned it, and now we're going to teach you tools and techniques on how to get your life back that you thought was shattered by addiction.
Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Brian Jackson, and I am here with my partner and close friend, Miss Diane McQueen. We call her Di. And happy belated Valentine's Day, Di.
Hey, thanks so much, B, and happy belated anniversary to you and Valentine's Day, of course, but happy anniversary. How many million years has it been?
So 25 years, February the 14th, since I checked into treatment. And so I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since then.
Isn't that awesome?
So,
25 years.
yeah. It seems like yesterday, but each day is what it is. But have not had the urge or the desire or picked up a drink. So
Isn't that
feels
fantastic? And
good.
good for you. And you know what that means? Lots of hope for a lot of people who are hopefully listening today, um, because that is where people get experience, strength, and hope. You know, that old belief that one and done is not possible is not true, because both of us are here to tell you it is.
Well, I'm one and done up until now. I gotta be one and
Oh,
done
all we
till
can do is take
when
it a
I'm done.
day at a time. But I go, so
Right.
far, so good.
So far, so good. But yeah, I continue to do what's suggested to try and maintain my sobriety, including going to meetings and talking to people in the program. So, it's a journey without an end, but it's fun anyhow.
Well, exactly. And it changed. I mean, what seemed to me, at least in the beginning, a little bit arduous and like confusing, etc., now is a joy. So I love learning and love learning. But speaking of which, what are
Yeah,
we talking about today?
speaking of fun. So, here we are, in the middle of February, and I think we did a podcast. I know we did a podcast on dry January. And it was really interesting to me, unsolicited from people who don't know, what I do or anything about me, that, hey, we're trying dry January, dry January. So, a couple of these people I checked back in with, or they checked back in with me. And it was interesting because it was kind of all across the board. There were some people who were like, oh my God, I never realized, like I've lost weight, my complexion seems to be better, I'm sleeping better, I'm eating healthier, and we're able to make it through the 30 days. And then there's some people who said, you know what, I may try this on for quite a while. Now they said, I'm going to stop drinking, but they didn't say stop drinking forever. But, it was such a good experience for them and they felt much better. And it wasn't because somebody was asking them to stop drinking that they did it. Now, there were some other people who really had a tough time with it. And it was almost frightening and scary to some people that an eye-opening um, for people who did not think they had a drinking problem. They were regular drinkers and thought 30 days, big deal. I can stop. In 4 days in, 5 days in, some people 10 days in, they just couldn't handle it. Heard a lot of big, yeah, I'm going to call them excuses like, oh, the football game was on, or this or that or the other thing. But it wasn't like they just picked up a drink for the football game, on a Saturday or a Sunday. They continued to go out and to drink. So, I think that there's some people, and you and I have talked about that, if you can't do 30 days, on your own willpower, then who has the power, you or the alcohol? And so there's definitely concern from where you and I sit for a person who is unable to stop for 30 days, that they have a physical or psychological craving for it and they need it, um, which is a red flag. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Heard similar things, and people that I had talked to about it or said to me, I'm going to do that. Some people knowing what we do for a living and other people not, like you said. But I agree with you. It's a red flag. Doesn't mean it's necessarily the elephant in the room, but it certainly would be something that would make you stop and take pause, right? And say, okay, what's our criteria be for people who have a alcohol, or shall we say a substance use disorder, but alcohol disorder, that would be one of them, right? One of our tests that we always have said to people is like, you don't think you have a problem? Well, go ahead and experiment a little bit. So why don't we talk a little bit about some of the other things that someone might look for if they were concerned that maybe they actually do potentially have a
well,
problem?
I like to kick the daylights out of the obvious, right? So the first question I would ask, and everybody, you can ask this of yourself, if something's causing a problem, it is a problem. So if alcohol is causing a problem, you might have an alcohol problem. And when I say causing a problem, maybe your spouse is like pointing it out to you.
Yep.
Maybe your children are saying something to you. Maybe you've had a DUI. Maybe you're missing work as a result of your drinking. So that's causing problems. The next one would be, have you ever put a limit on how much you're going to drink? So if you said to yourself, you know what, I'm going to go to this party and I'm having 3 drinks tops and that's it, and you end up having 6 or 7, um, you've got to ask yourself, well, who's got control over this? Is it me or is it the alcohol? And again, you're going to answer these questions for yourself. And then the third one, um, is, you have you ever been less than honest about your drinking? So you come home and your wife says, "Hi, Brian, how are you? Where'd you go? I went to a party. How much did you have to drink? Oh, I had 2 drinks when I had 7." So people who do not have a problem with alcohol do not have to be less than honest about their drinking. So those 3 things to me, to thy own self be true. If you can answer those 3 questions, it's not like some type of neuro brain surgery testing that we're doing on you. These are 3 questions that you know the answers to. And but we see with a lot of people too that went return to drinking was that they just kind of turned their back on it and said, I mean, they're not looking back at it again, like, okay, I didn't make it to 30 days, and really not much self-reflection on why they couldn't or what their drinking habits are like.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are really wonderful, point out to people the most basic kinds of things, right? But most people don't think about it. Now, we get people who think oftentimes about, like, I woke up and I'm shaky and I feel kind of awful, and then I drank and I felt better. That's probably someone who's a little bit more progressed into their disease a bit. Um, but from the day to day kinds of stuff, we'd find out that people don't even recognize because, quote unquote, they're functional, and therefore they start justifying, another way of looking at this, right? Well, I get up every morning, I go to work, um I pay my bills, my doctor isn't telling me I'm in terrible physical condition. And when we start to hear things like that, you go, well, is it a rationalization? And again, flipping back to the questions you just asked, that's how you start to determine for yourself. The other side of that is neither Brian nor I believe that somebody is a leper if they happen to have something that might be affecting them in a negative way. There are solutions to these issues. And, we're always very happy when someone sort of figures it out, first of all, on their own. And I believe, like most people, right, you kind of know, but the question is, are you being, as Bry pointed out, honest with yourself? Forget about everybody else around you, but are you telling yourself the truth? And,
Yeah. And the other thing too is, age has a lot to do with this.
yep,
Like a lot of people in their 20s and 30s can run the streets all night, get up, go to work,
yep,
perform at a very high level. But we all know what the hangover is like. So a hangover, you don't feel good, your head hurts, and you kind of go, okay, I drank too much last night. But I really want you to pay attention to is 2 or 3 days after you've woken up with that hangover, even whether you drank or not drank, pay attention to your mood. Because what happens is this ingesting of the central nervous system depressant, i.e., alcohol, is going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your energy level. You're going to notice too if there are activities that you really used to love doing, be it kayaking, or swimming, or golfing, or pickleball, or whatever it is. If you start seeing a lot of those activities start falling away and falling away and falling away, and you connect the dot that, okay, I'm not motivated because I'm drinking too much to get up off the couch and go do what I want to do, or you're canceling commitments that you've made to people because you don't feel well. So it is progressive, and every decade that we go into, it takes less and less alcohol to do a lot of damage to the body's systems. I watched a TEDx um, reel, I guess, the other night. I don't know if I told you about this diet, but this gal was on, and people get on TEDx and they want to come up with all these theories and stuff, but she made it very, very simple. She said, we live in a society where alcohol is marketed as the solution for being overworked, stressed out, anxious, and, have a drink and you'll relax and everything will be like that. Well, if alcohol is a solution, why are we not all like Zen? Like if we were drinking alcohol? Because what
Right.
happens is after you have that drink, because you're overworked, stressed, whatever, anxious, guess what? The next day, you're still overworked, you're still stressed, and you're still anxious. So we're getting this temporary fix from the alcohol. So and then she went on to show how alcohol, she showed the brain and how alcohol, we're finding out more and more how it affects so many systems of the body to the negative. I mean,
Yeah.
even reproductive systems in women get affected. So, if you're in that age range where you're thinking about having children and you're, abusing alcohol, you really need to be careful. And then, of course, the liver, when the ethyl alcohol gets in the system, it works like overtime, trying to get rid of what is poison. And you and I have seen through the years people with hypertension, people with diabetes, directly related to their drinking. And the reason we know that is because they had the courage to come to us in 12 weeks. They stopped using and there was no alcohol in their system. And guess what? Their sugar numbers went down.
Their
Their
blood pressure
hypertension
went
numbers
down.
went down.
Right.
So, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you ingest ethyl alcohol, which is a poison, that it's not good for you. And so,
Exactly. And we know that through studies, et cetera, that it affects women much more so than men. Or actually, I shouldn't say much more so, but more readily, right? It takes less alcohol to do internal damage to women's organs because we don't have as much water. So, it starts to take its toll on women a little bit sooner. And yes, more and more and more, and they're starting to have major studies that show the physical effects. I think you brought up earlier, B, that, here's one of those things that are really, really important is the way it affects people's sleep. And,
yeah,
again and again and again, how many times have we had someone say to us after they've, had some sobriety that they're sleeping so much better? And we're like, and they were like, it's so much better. I used to think alcohol, and we get it all the time where people will say, but I have to have a drink because it's the only thing that makes me sleep. And we have to explain to them, no, that's actually not true. Your sleep is being affected deeply. You don't get the kind of good REM sleep that you need. And actually, it's sort of doing just the opposite. The quality of sleep is actually worse than if you were to get off the alcohol, which in fact, in time, they usually go like, wow, I'm sleeping like a baby. What's going on here? And we're like, you
yeah, I
got
have
rid of alcohol.
yeah, I have a couple of clients, patients that have, and I have one of those Aura rings, that
Yeah.
monitors your sleep, whether you're having light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. And one gentleman did drink and he said, oh my God, my sleep was like terrible. It was like a 60 when he was scoring in the 90s. And he looked at it and, we talked about sugar. So, and I found it out with myself too, where I'm, cheating and eating ice cream right before I go to bed, that my numbers are not as good as the nights that I don't have any sweets before I go to bed. So it's the craving for the sugar that are waking us up. So it's different colors on different watches and rings, but when you see all that yellow on mine, that's awake time where you're awake. You're awake. Yeah, that's a really good point, Di.
Well, it's really cool that you just mentioned that too, right? And that's another thing that a lot of people don't really understand, that when we metabolize alcohol, it turns to sugar, right? A good portion of it turns to sugar. And that's why we crave it so much more. I mean, the brain doesn't know, which part of this is sugar and isn't, but we do know that it affects our sleep deeply or badly, not deeply, because obviously we're not sleeping deeply. And then our
Yeah, I just
moods
want to throw
affect.
that out there too. It's like, I've had people say, um, they drank so much and they woke up that morning and swore, there's absolutely no way I'm going to drink today. And even some of the people that try to do this dry January, where they felt like, oh God, I messed up, you know, I'm not gonna drink. They did it on a Friday night, and there's no way I'm drinking Saturday night. And by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they had this feeling in their chest of what mimics anxiety, but what it actually is a craving for
Mhm.
sugar.
Right.
Sugar is eight times as addictive as cocaine, believe it or not.
Ah,
You get
I do. I do.
sugar, you get the dopamine goodie, your sugar drops, you crave the sugar, so you got to get the sugar. And so outside of your awareness, you're having that drink of alcohol, which is now you're ingesting the sugar, and that feeling of what you thought was anxiety, that sugar craving is now getting satisfied. So it's just real interesting. And then you see people who are like, man, I didn't even work out and I lost 15 pounds, in 30 days. I said, because you weren't drinking or
Yeah, you're
consuming all
saving
the
1,200
alcohol.
calories a night in alcohol. Right, exactly.
Right.
But
Right.
it is really amazing, and I think most people don't realize the physiological, application of what alcohol actually does. Forget about the psychological stuff, because that brings us to our next thing, right? Is the mood swings, the ups, the downs, the ins, the outs, and how many people don't recognize that they've been all over the map with their moods, when they're drinking. And that's the next thing we hear all the time. Wow, geez, I can't believe it. My moods have stabilized so much. I'm actually really happy. And not everybody. And again, people have their highs and lows, but consistently across the board, we see much more consistent behavior rather than this up, down, all over the map, or chronically depressed and anxious. So that's another real area that we think is super important to pay attention to. And again, another thing that most people don't realize until they've had some time away from, that they start to recognize, like, wow, I didn't even know that was happening. And what is that? And it all relates back to, the physical cravings, the ups and downs in our body, how this stuff works in our body, how it is metabolized, how it's not metabolized, how we sleep. It all
Yeah,
is.
when you think about it though, Di, like, I mean, we're not coming up with anything that's like rocket science here, but say for example, you drank too much. So as a result of not of drinking too much, not getting good REM sleep because your body is craving sugar
Right.
outside of your awareness 3 nights a week, you wake up in the morning and guess what? You drank too much, you haven't had enough sleep, stressors are way more pronounced in your life. You're probably going to be snippy.
Mm-hmm.
And what you hear, and I've heard from people, is wow, I am sleeping better. I feel better. And guess what? I'm biting my tongue. I don't feel as agitated as I used to. So again, just these outward things that you can notice for yourself. It's not like sitting with Di or me and we, rub our chin and say, "Oh, we think you have an alcohol problem." You can say to yourself, "Is alcohol causing problems? Am I having trouble sleeping? Am I snippy? Am I being less than honest about how much I'm drinking?"
Right. Exactly. Another thing that I also always ask people and sort of recognize is your behavior consistently inconsistent? Right. And that
Exactly.
seems to be one of those things where we have, an over and over and over again reporting of, my wife, my husband, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my kids are always complaining that I'm consistently inconsistent, and it's causing all kinds of problems in my life. And it always seems to coincide with alcohol, right? When you're using and abusing, and they go like, oh, and so that's another area where people go, oh my gosh, I started being the person I wanted to be. Because going back to what Bri was saying, when you wake up and you feel kind of crappy and you're snippy, and then you roll back over and you promised your person that you would get up and, go to the bank or the post office or mow the lawn, and you didn't do it, and they get upset. And we start this whole cycle of ick. Procrastination, right? And ick. And everybody starts to get agitated, and everything starts to break down, right? The whole family nucleus, whatever our little. So, I mean, there is an effect that is one, and then we start what we call the guilt shame cycle, right? Then the person feels terrible. And, pretty soon the guilt turns into shame. The shame gets so intense, and then boom, what's my solution? Back to the alcohol. So I forget temporarily. And then we start all those things.
It's insidious, but the great news is, if you feel like you're falling in this category, if you're answering these questions and you get 2 out of 3 of the first 3 I asked you, you're in. Okay. So maybe you might want to call us for a free consult, and we can talk it out with you and, get you to try and be, real with yourself, because that's where it all begins and ends, is being real with yourself. Because, the manipulation, the rationalization, the justification for why we didn't get up and mow the lawn is easy to come up with. But after a while, people start to realize that we're full of baloney. So we're here. And if you're a family member and you want to get a free consult, call us up. We'll give you our spiel.
We do have a website, which is familyandaddictionexperts.com. And on there is a bunch of free resources if you happen to be a family member and you want to look and see, is what is going on there. If you're a person who's in need of, some addiction treatment or considering it, and you just need some further information, again, let us know. We have a half-hour free consult, like Bryce said. We're here for you. We want to help in any way that we can. There's lots of solutions other than using and abusing, right? So there you have it. Thanks so much for joining our podcast, Healing Families Shattered by Addiction. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more important tools, techniques, and ways for you to focus on you instead of the alcoholic or addict in your world.
Until then, please go to our website, familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's familyandaddictionexperts.com. You'll also see links to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Please also, if you have any emails that you would like to send us, that's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. That's info@familyandaddictionexperts.com. With any thoughts, feelings, questions that you may have for us, we would love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.